I never thought I'd find myself in this situation. My wife, Emma, and I had been married for 5 years, and I believed we shared everything. We met in college, fell in love quickly, and it seemed like we had a perfect life together. However, a few months ago, I stumbled upon a part of her past that she had never shared with me. It happened when I was sorting through some old boxes in our attic, looking for my college yearbooks. Among the dusty textbooks and forgotten memorabilia, I found a small, locked box. I knew I shouldn't invade her privacy, but curiosity got the better of me. I found the key in a nearby drawer and unlocked it. Inside were photos, business cards, and letters. Evidence of her past work as an escort. My heart sank. How could she have hidden this from me? When she got home that evening, I confronted her. Emma didn't deny it. She explained that it was something she did to support herself through college. She didn't see anything wrong with it. After all, it was just a job, a way to pay the bills. But for me, it was a betrayal. It wasn't just the job itself, it was the fact that she had hidden such a significant part of her life from me. Our conversation quickly escalated into a heated argument. I told her that I couldn't see her past work as just a job. It was something that made me uncomfortable, something that I felt should have been disclosed before we got married. Emma defended herself, saying that it was her body, her choice, and that she didn't owe me an explanation for every aspect of her past. From that day forward, things changed between us. Trust was shattered, and I couldn't look at her the same way. Every time we fought, the topic would inevitably come up, fueling the fire of our arguments. We were already struggling financially, and this revelation only added more stress to our strained relationship. I found myself questioning everything, our marriage, her honesty, and my own feelings for her. I didn't know if I could continue being with someone who had kept such a significant secret from me. The financial pressure was mounting, and now, on top of everything, I had to deal with this emotional turmoil. Emma and I were at an impasse. We couldn't find a compromise, and the gap between us grew wider every day. I started to wonder if our marriage was beyond repair. In the weeks following my discovery about Emma's past, things between us remained tense. We tried to patch things up, but the trust that had been shattered was hard to rebuild. I found myself scrutinizing her actions more closely, looking for any sign that she might be hiding something else from me. Emma had started spending more time out of the house. She told me she was picking up extra freelance work to help with our financial problems. On the surface, it seemed reasonable. Our bills were piling up, and we desperately needed the extra income. But something about her explanation didn't sit right with me. One night, she came home late, well past midnight. She said she had been working on a project at a coffee shop, but she looked different. Disheveled and tired in a way that didn't match up with her story. I tried to push the doubts aside, but they gnawed at me, making me question everything. The next day, I decided to check our bank account for any unusual transactions. There were several withdrawals that didn't make sense, and they were made at odd hours. When I asked Emma about them, she brushed it off, saying it was for business expenses and supplies she needed for her freelance work. She seemed irritated that I was questioning her, and the conversation quickly turned into another argument. As days turned into weeks, Emma's absences became more frequent. She'd leave the house dressed nicely, which seemed unnecessary for someone just heading to a coffee shop to work on freelance projects. I started to notice that she was receiving more texts and calls than usual, and she'd often step outside to take them, far from earshot. When I asked who was calling, she'd say it was just clients or friends checking in. Despite her reassurances, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. One evening, I decided to follow her. I hated the idea of spying on my own wife, but I needed to know the truth. She left the house around 7 p.m., saying she had a late meeting with a client. I waited a few minutes before getting in my car and driving after her, keeping a safe distance. Emma drove to a part of town I didn't recognize, eventually pulling into the parking lot of a high-end hotel. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched her get out of the car, straightening her dress and checking her reflection in the window. She walked inside with a confidence that only deepened my suspicions. I sat in my car for what felt like an eternity, torn between wanting to confront her right then and there and needing to know more before making any accusations. Eventually, I drove home, my mind racing with possibilities. I didn't sleep at all that night, replaying the evening's events over and over in my head. The next morning, Emma returned home, looking exhausted but trying to act normal. I asked her how her meeting went, and she gave me a rehearsed answer about a difficult client and a long night of negotiations. I pretended to believe her, but inside, I was fuming. I knew I needed proof before I confronted her. The idea of her going back to her old ways, especially after everything we had been through, was too much to bear. But as much as I wanted to trust her, the evidence was piling up, and my suspicions were growing stronger by the day. The tension in our marriage continued to build. Emma's explanations for her frequent absences and late nights became less convincing with each passing day. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something from me, and I was determined to find out what it was. A few weeks later, I got a call from a former colleague offering me a short-term job out of town. The pay was good, and it seemed like the perfect opportunity to get away from the mounting stress at home. I accepted the offer, hoping that some distance might give me a clearer perspective on everything. Emma seemed supportive of the idea, almost relieved that I would be away for a few days. She kissed me goodbye, and I left for what she believed was a 3-day business trip. In reality, I had no intention of leaving town. Instead, I rented a room at a small motel nearby and planned to keep a close watch on her. The first night passed without incident. Emma stayed home, and everything seemed normal. But on the second night, things changed. I parked my car a few blocks away from our house and waited in the shadows, watching. Around 8 p.m., a sleek black car pulled up, and a well-dressed man stepped out. He walked up to our front door and knocked. Moments later, Emma answered, dressed in a way that left no doubt about her intentions. She welcomed him inside, and my worst fears were confirmed. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal. I could hardly breathe as I watched the scene unfold. I decided to wait a little longer, hoping to catch her in the act and confront her with undeniable proof. After what felt like an eternity, I couldn't take it any longer. I marched up to the door, my heart pounding in my chest, and used my key to let myself in. The sight that greeted me was worse than I had imagined. Emma and the man were in our living room, too engrossed in each other to notice me at first. When they finally realized I was there, the look of shock on Emma's face was almost satisfying. The man quickly gathered his things and left, not wanting to get involved in our domestic dispute. Emma tried to explain, but her words were a jumbled mess of excuses and apologies. She claimed she was only doing it for the money, that she was trying to help us out of our financial troubles. But all I could see was the betrayal. The woman I loved, the woman I had trusted, had been lying to me and cheating on me in our own home. I was furious, but more than that, I was heartbroken. I couldn't believe that she had been sneaking around behind my back, continuing her old profession while pretending everything was fine. The financial stress, the late nights, the suspicious behavior, it all made sense now. She had never stopped being an escort. She had just gotten better at hiding it. I couldn't stay in that house a moment longer. I packed a bag and left, not knowing where I was going or what I would do next. Emma begged me to stay, to let her explain, but I couldn't listen. The trust between us was shattered beyond repair. As I drove away, I knew that our marriage was over. Emma had made her choice, and now I had to make mine. Driving away from our house, I felt a mixture of rage, sorrow, and confusion. I ended up at a friend's place, someone who had always been there for me. Mark listened as I poured out the entire story, from finding out about Emma's past to the gut-wrenching discovery in our living room. He was as shocked as I was, and his support helped ground me, giving me the strength to face what was next. The next morning, I woke up with a clearer head but an aching heart. I knew I had to confront Emma properly and lay out everything. I couldn't let her think that she could continue deceiving me and expect me to just go along with it. I drove back to the house, unsure of what to expect but ready to face whatever came. Emma was there, sitting on the couch, looking like she hadn't slept at all. The moment I walked in, she started to cry, pleading with me to understand, to forgive her. She claimed she had no other choice, that she was doing it for us, for our financial stability. But her words felt hollow. "Do you think this is the only way to fix our financial problems?" I demanded. "You lied to me? Emma, you brought strangers into our home, into our lives. How could you do this?" she sobbed, trying to reach for me, but I stepped back. I couldn't bear her touch, not after everything. "I thought I could handle it," she said through her tears. "I didn't want to burden you with more worries. I thought I could keep it separate, that it wouldn't affect us." "Well, it did," I snapped. You betrayed my trust. This isn't just about the money. It's about honesty, about respect, and you've shown me neither. We argued for what felt like hours. Emma kept insisting that she only did it because she felt we had no other options, that she was trying to protect me from the financial strain, but I couldn't accept that. There had to have been other ways that didn't involve deceit and betrayal. In the heat of the moment, I issued an ultimatum. Emma, you need to quit. Now, cut all ties with that part of your life. If you want any chance of saving this marriage, you need to prove to me that you can be honest and faithful. Emma hesitated, her eyes searching mine for any sign of leniency. I will, she finally said. I'll quit, I promise. Just give me a chance to make things right. I nodded, though deep down, I wasn't sure if I could ever trust her again. Emma, this is your last chance. One more lie, one more deception, and I'm gone for good. The days that followed were excruciating. Emma seemed sincere in her efforts to change. She deleted contacts, refused calls, and stayed home more. But the damage had been done. I couldn't shake the image of her with that man, the lies she had spun, the secret life she had led. Every time I looked at her, I saw betrayal. Our financial situation didn't improve immediately, but I took on extra work, trying to make up for the lost income. Despite her promise, a part of me remained skeptical, always on edge, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Emma, on her part, tried to be the perfect wife, but it felt forced, artificial. The ease and comfort we once had were replaced by a strained, uneasy coexistence. Every time she went out, every phone call she took, my mind spiraled into dark places. Then, one night, while I was working late, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a client of Emma's, furious and demanding to know why she hadn't shown up for their scheduled meeting. My heart sank as the realization hit me she hadn't quit. She had just gotten better at hiding it. That night, I made up my mind. I couldn't live like this anymore. The woman I had loved and trusted had made her choice, and now I had to make mine. The next morning, I packed my bags, left a note on the kitchen table, and walked out the door, knowing that I would never look back. Emma had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. As the realization of Emma's continued betrayal sank in, a dark resolve formed within me. I had given her a chance to make things right, to prove that she valued our marriage and my trust. Instead, she had spat on that chance and continued her deceit. The pain and anger I felt were overwhelming, and I knew I couldn't let her get away with it. I decided to hurt her the way she had hurt me, to make her feel the same betrayal and heartbreak. I returned home that night with a plan. I would have my revenge, and I wouldn't hide it. Emma would see the consequences of her actions firsthand. Over the next few days, I reconnected with old friends and started going out more often. I made sure Emma knew about it, casually mentioning my plans and watching her reaction. She seemed relieved at first, probably thinking I was trying to move on from the discovery. Little did she know that my intentions were far from innocent. The first opportunity presented itself at a bar I used to frequent. I met a woman named Lisa, who was more than willing to engage in a little harmless flirting. One thing led to another, and soon we were back at my place. Emma was in the living room when we walked in, her face a mixture of shock and confusion. "Who's this?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Lisa," I said casually, wrapping my arm around her waist. "She's going to be spending the night." Emma's eyes widened, but she didn't say anything. She just stood there, frozen, as Lisa and I made our way to the bedroom. I made sure the door was left slightly ajar, ensuring Emma could hear everything. The next morning, the look on Emma's face was a mix of devastation and disbelief. But she didn't confront me. Instead, she silently endured, perhaps hoping it was a one-time thing. But it wasn't. Over the next few weeks, I brought different women home. I didn't bother hiding it. I flaunted my affairs right in front of Emma, making sure she felt every bit of the pain and humiliation I had endured. Each time, she would look at me with those pleading eyes, silently begging me to stop, but I wouldn't. I couldn't. This was my revenge, my way of showing her that betrayal cuts both ways. One evening, I brought home a woman named Jessica. She was bold and uninhibited, and I knew Emma would be home when we arrived. I didn't care. We made out in the hallway, knowing Emma could see us. The tension in the air was palpable as Jessica and I stumbled into the bedroom, our laughter echoing through the house. The next morning, Emma finally broke. "Why are you doing this?" she screamed, tears streaming down her face. "Why are you trying to hurt me?" "Why?" I shouted back, Because you lied to me, Emma. You betrayed me. You brought strangers into our home, into our lives. This is your doing, not mine. If you can't handle the pain, maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to keep lying. She crumpled to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt, but it was quickly overshadowed by the memory of her betrayal. I walked out of the house, leaving her to her misery. As the weeks turned into months, our house became a battleground. Emma's attempts to win back my trust were futile. She tried to apologize, to explain, but I wouldn't listen. My heart had hardened, and I was determined to make her pay. I knew this couldn't go on forever. Deep down, I knew that my actions were destroying both of us, but I wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. Emma needed to understand the depth of the pain she had caused, and I would make sure she never forgot. The satisfaction I initially felt from my revenge quickly turned into something much darker. The more I tried to hurt Emma, the more I felt myself being consumed by the same pain and anger that had driven me to this point. Our home had become a war zone, with constant tension and no semblance of the love we once shared. One evening, after another particularly blatant display of my infidelity, I found Emma sitting at the kitchen table, staring at an untouched cup of coffee. She looked defeated, broken in a way that I had never seen before. Part of me wanted to reach out to her, to comfort her, but the bitterness inside me kept me rooted in place. "We can't keep living like this," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I scoffed, leaning against the door frame. "You should have thought about that before you decided to lie to me, before you chose to go back to your old ways." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "I made a mistake, David. I thought I could handle it, that it wouldn't affect us, but I was wrong. I was trying to help, but I see now that I was only making things worse." Her words stung, but I couldn't let go of my anger. "It's too late for apologies, Emma. You betrayed me, and now you have to live with the consequences." The days dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity. I continued my affairs, each one a hollow attempt to fill the void Emma's betrayal had left. I knew I was destroying myself, but I couldn't stop. It was like I was trapped in a cycle of pain and revenge, unable to break free. One night, I came home late, smelling of alcohol and perfume. Emma was waiting for me in the living room, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked at me with a mixture of sadness and resignation. "David, we need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. I sighed, dropping my keys on the table. "What now?" "I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice breaking. "I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry, but this isn't fixing anything. It's only making things worse." I stared at her, the anger boiling inside me. "You think you can just apologize and everything will be okay? You think I can just forget what you did?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "I know things will never be the same, but this cycle of revenge, it's killing us. David, we need to find a way to move forward, or we need to let go." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Deep down, I knew she was right. We couldn't keep living like this, trapped in a vicious cycle of pain and retribution. But I wasn't ready to forgive her, and I didn't know if I ever would be. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again," I admitted, my voice barely audible. Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand, but please, let's stop hurting each other. If we can't fix this, then maybe it's time to let go." For the first time in months, I felt the weight of my own actions. I had been so consumed by my desire for revenge that I hadn't stopped to consider the toll it was taking on both of us. I looked at Emma, seeing the pain and regret in her eyes, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of the love we once shared. But it was too late. Too much had been said. Too much had been done. Our relationship was beyond repair, and we both knew it. "I think you're right," I said finally, my voice heavy with resignation. "Maybe it's time to let go." Emma sobbed quietly, and I felt a pang of sorrow for the life we had lost. We had been through so much together, but in the end, it hadn't been enough. As I walked out of the room, I knew that this was the beginning of the end. Our marriage was over, and all that was left was to pick up the pieces and try to move on. In the weeks that followed, we began the painful process of disentangling our lives. The house that had once been filled with laughter and love was now a silent reminder of our shattered dreams. Emma moved out, and I was left alone with my thoughts, haunted by the memories of what we had lost. I knew I had to find a way to heal, to move forward, but for now, all I could do was take it one day at a time, hoping that someday the pain would fade and I could find peace. The house felt eerily quiet after Emma moved out. The silence was both a relief and a burden. I had wanted her to feel the pain of betrayal, to suffer as I had, but now that she was gone, the emptiness was overwhelming. I was left with my own thoughts and the haunting memories of what used to be. In the first few days after Emma left, I continued my reckless behavior. I brought different women home, drank excessively, and tried to drown my sorrows in fleeting moments of pleasure. But no matter what I did, the void inside me remained. The more I tried to escape the pain, the more it consumed me. One evening, after another meaningless encounter, I found myself alone in the living room, surrounded by empty bottles and the remnants of my destructive lifestyle. I stared at a photo of Emma and me from happier times, the smiles on our faces now a stark contrast to the reality we were living. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to reflect on everything that had happened. I thought about the day I discovered Emma's past, the anger and betrayal I felt, and the path of vengeance I had chosen. I realized that in my quest to hurt her, I had only succeeded in hurting myself. I remembered the look in Emma's eyes when she pleaded with me to stop, the pain and regret she had shown. Despite her betrayal, she had tried to make amends, to salvage what was left of our marriage, but I had been too blinded by my own rage to see it. As the days turned into weeks, I began to feel the weight of my actions more acutely. I saw the destruction I had wrought not just on Emma, but on myself. My job suffered, my friendships strained, and my mental health deteriorated. I was living in a self-imposed hell, and it was time to face the truth. One night, in a rare moment of clarity, I decided to reach out to Emma. I needed to talk to her, to find some closure, and to apologize for my own mistakes. I called her, and to my surprise, she answered. "Emma," I began, my voice trembling. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I need to talk to you. Can we meet?" There was a long pause before she replied. "Okay, David, we can meet." We agreed to meet at a park we used to visit when we were first dating. It was a place filled with memories of our early love, and I hoped it might help us find some common ground. When I arrived, Emma was already there, sitting on a bench, looking out at the lake. She looked tired, but there was a calmness about her that I hadn't seen in a long time. I sat down beside her, unsure of where to start. "Emma," I said finally, "I'm sorry for everything. I was so hurt and angry that I couldn't see past my own pain. I wanted to make you suffer, but all I did was destroy us both." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm sorry too, David. I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I see now that I was wrong. I should have been honest with you from the start." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of our shared sorrow hanging in the air. Eventually, Emma spoke again. "I've been seeing a therapist," she said quietly. "She's helped me understand a lot about myself and my actions. I know I can't undo the past, but I want to learn from it to be better." Her words struck a chord with me. I realized that I too needed to heal, to find a way to move forward. "I think I need to see someone too," I admitted. "I've been so lost, so consumed by anger. I don't want to live like this anymore." Emma reached out and took my hand. "David, we've both made mistakes, but it's never too late to start over, to find a new path." As we sat there, holding hands and looking out at the lake, I felt a glimmer of hope. I knew that our marriage was over, but maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to heal and move forward. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. It was a small step, but it was a step in the right direction. As Emma and I sat by the lake, hand in hand, the weight of our shared history seemed to lift slightly. There was a long road ahead of us, but for the first time in months, we were talking, really talking. We spoke about our fears, our mistakes, and the possibility of healing. The idea of moving forward separately had seemed like the only option. But as we opened up to each other, a new possibility emerged. Over the next few weeks, Emma and I continued to meet. We went for long walks, reminisced about the good times, and discussed what had gone wrong. The more we talked, the more we realized that beneath the layers of hurt and betrayal, there was still a deep connection. It wasn't easy, and there were many difficult conversations, but slowly, a spark of hope began to grow. One evening, after a particularly intense conversation, Emma looked at me with tears in her eyes. "David, do you think there's any chance we could try to fix this? I know we've both hurt each other deeply, but I still love you. I always have." Her words took me by surprise. I had been so focused on the pain and betrayal that I hadn't allowed myself to consider the possibility of reconciliation. But as I looked at her, I felt a flicker of the love that had brought us together in the first place. Emma, I don't know, I admitted. It won't be easy. We have a lot of work to do, and I don't know if we can ever fully repair what's been broken. But I still love you too. Maybe we owe it to ourselves to try. With that tentative agreement, we began the difficult journey of rebuilding our relationship. We started seeing a marriage counselor, working through our issues with the help of a professional. It was painful to confront our mistakes, but it was also cathartic. Each session brought us closer, helping us to understand each other's perspectives and to forgive. Emma quit her escort job for good. This time, with my full support, we sat down together and came up with a plan to address our financial difficulties without resorting to desperate measures. It was a struggle, but we faced it together as a team. We also made a conscious effort to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. Transparency became our new mantra. We shared everything: our fears, our hopes, our daily struggles. Slowly but surely, the walls between us began to come down. Months passed, and while the road to recovery was long and fraught with challenges, we were making progress. There were setbacks and moments of doubt, but each time, we came back to the commitment we had made to each other. One day, as we were sitting in our living room, Emma turned to me and smiled. "Do you remember our first date?" she asked. I nodded, a smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. "Of course. You wore that red dress, and we talked for hours at that little cafe downtown." She laughed, a genuine, happy sound that warmed my heart. "I still have that dress. Maybe I'll wear it again sometime." As I looked at her, I realized just how far we had come. We had been through hell and back, but we had emerged stronger, more resilient. Our love had been tested in the most brutal of ways, but it had survived. "Emma," I said, taking her hand, "I'm so glad we decided to give this another chance. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm willing to face it with you." She squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with tears. "Me too, David. Me too." In that moment, I knew that while the scars of our past would never fully fade, we had found a way to move forward. Together, we could face whatever came our way, stronger and more united than ever before.